Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike .shop. Welcome to part 8 of The Bag Company. This is your host, Chris James. Ray came wandering by. Pat, Pam. Yes, Pam. How's it going? Going. He fidgeted with some of the papers on her desk. Pam leaned close so she wouldn't be overheard. Uncle Ray, what's in the basement? Ray looked as if he was going to answer, but then, basement? Yes, it's the basement. You see, no one really knows. That is, no one ever goes down there. Not since that nastiness 15 years ago. Yeah, like 15 years ago. Pam wanted an answer. You mean you've never tried to find out? Ray looked around for somebody else to pass the question off to. Yes, I know. That is, I don't know what it is. I know I should know, but I don't know. No. The sound of fighting came up through the floor. Pam looked at Ray and then the waiting folks waiting in the waiting room. A few people looked around as if something they had heard, then convinced themselves they hadn't, and they went back to waiting. Someone screamed, followed by steel hitting against something hard. Pam could hear yelling, faint and distant. As she figured this was the sound of battle. She hoped she hadn't sent the ghost soldiers to their doom. Ray looked over at the basement door. Ah, dear, that doesn't look good. The door was swinging open. Pam came to her feet, unsure if she should go see who or what had opened the portal to the underground or run for the exit. The huge black head appeared from the shadows. Its teeth, that were visible, stuck out in every direction. They were long and sharp and dangerous looking. Meanwhile, on the south side of town, Bob and his pals were standing in something that was supposed to be a formation. In the center stood a giant of a man. His clothing fit him like a rhinoceros stuffed into a uniform meant for somebody a lot less monstrous. His one good eye rolled over them like a steamroller. You boys look tired. A front-leaning rest position. Move. Bob and the rest quickly dropped to the ground, supported by their arms, which fought to support their bodies against gravity. A four-count push-up. Begin. 1, 2, 3. The victims of this monster, squeezed into a drill sergeant's uniform, pushed themselves up and down in cadence with his voice, and yelled out, 1. 1, 2, 3. 2. They all tried to yell as one voice. Gosh darn it, this thing weighs a ton. The voice came from just behind the giant head. Pam saw several of the ghost soldiers on either side of the head. They were holding a couple of rifles crossways underneath the thing, trying to maneuver it out through the door. Groans and moans could be heard coming from the stairs behind this creature. The sound of wood complaining about being forced to endure too much weight came from the semi-darkness as well. Try wiggling the darn thing. Maybe it'll pop through. Push, push, pull, pull. Ray continued to look at the door, wondering why it had opened on its own. It would appear as if we have a breeze blowing from down there. Yes, a breeze. He failed to see the ghostly squad coming from below, as well as the hideous beast that they carried in their midst. The hideous beast wasn't invisible, as were the ghosts. It was just that Ray's brain could only process so much information at a time, and it sure wasn't about to try dealing with this particular creature right now. The people waiting in the waiting room all had other things on their minds right now, so they also failed to perceive the thing being carried from the basement, as well as the things carrying the thing. It also helped that Pam was the only one currently in the room that had psychic abilities. It helped not the least bit that Pam was not currently invisible. As she watched the ghosts bring this monster up from the former domain, those around her were watching her as she put on a good show. Pam, what is that thing? The officer Pam said, "What is that thing?" The officer made to remove his hat in a gallant swipe of his hand. He found his hat was no longer on top of his head, having been snarfed by the creature that now lay dead in the cradle of the weaponry carried by his men. "We vanquished this giant worm and will now remove it from your fair countenance." He shoved one hand down the creature's mouth and began rummaging around, trying to reacquire his Stetson. Pam was somewhat nonplussed. "Is that what's been roaming around down there all this time?" A shudder ran through her as she contemplated the night she had run from as well as over this giant 25-foot slime fiend. Pulling his arm and hat from the creature's maw, the officer slapped it against his thigh, trying to dislodge the large chunks of worm drool. It was quite a battle. The hideous fiend attempted to get the better of us, but we were victorious. It shall bother you none henceforth. Pam was having some difficulty with this flowery verbiage. Seeing as he was 170-something years old, he had very right to use unconventional speech. Those watching Pam had little difficulty coming to the determination she had lost it. Ray hoped to save his niece from being a full-time student at the Laugh Academy, a.k.a. a sane asylum. In other words, Pam, dear Pam, that is, have you been working too much? Maybe just a bit too much, that is. He looked at his niece as if she had slipped a gear or two. Pam looked at her uncle, then the room full of customers who were all ignoring her but not very successfully. She then looked at the ghost soldiers carrying the dead something across the room. Pam had one of those moments when ideas all flooded her head at once, fighting for dominance of her consciousness. The idea that filled her head the most was that she had gone completely nuts, just like her Aunt Ramona. It looked as if it was time to check into the state hospital. She was seeing things that weren't there and hearing those things that weren't there speaking and speaking to them. Most people who hear things are crazy. Maybe they would put her in a room with her aunt. They could spend their days collecting toenail clippings together. Her aunt had quite a collection already. Pam let go a sigh that filled the air around her with all the despair a 17-year-old could muster. "Yes, I'm afraid so. Perhaps I should just totter on home and see about getting a prescription for Thorazine filled at the local corner pharmacy." She felt just a little bit embarrassed about losing her mind in such a public place. The army of dead continued with their task at hand, moving the overly cumbersome organism out the front door and onto the yard beyond. Ray placed one hand on Pam's arm. "Could you come along for a second, just a minute?" He pulled Pam towards the kitchen, being the closest door to escape through. Once he had his niece safely on the far side of the closed door, he looked her in the eye. Actually, he looked her in both eyes, both at one time. Two eyes, that is. "Are you seeing things like in things?" He looked around the room and found Carol Munchausen, along with 6 dogs, were all looking at them. Carol had grass sticking out from her sweater, as well as the cuffs of her pants. Things that I can't see. See that is as in you can see, but I can't. Pam was close to tears. Am I going nuts? Oh, you mean like your Aunt Ramona? The one in the hospital, locked up in there, that is? He looked at one of the dogs, and the dog smiled at him. No, you're not crazy. Not crazy like your aunt. No. But but I see a bunch of dead soldiers hustling a giant worm with teeth through the front room, and nobody else sees anything, even kind of wormy. Her chin did that quivering thing that chins do in times of great anxiety. Her vision was getting a bit blurry. Ray got busy. Listen. No, have a seat first and then listen. You can listen as you're taking a seat. Yes, listen and sitting. He scooted a chair out and managed to get her seated in it without hitting both her shins with it. Your grandmother, that would be my mother. Yes, my mother, she had abilities. He looked over his shoulder at the dog that was still smiling at him. She could hear things no one, well, hardly no one, anyone hardly could hear. Pam made a sniffling sound. I hear things and I see things. That just makes you doubly more so able. He tried to not look at the smiling dog. Seeing and hearing things isn't not always a sign of you're not crazy, you're psychic. Are you sure? If you said you saw a politician doing the right thing, yes, the right thing, I would say the girl is off to the loony farm. Yes, nuts, but you see dead folks at the cemetery. I checked. George told me you did a good job. Dead soldiers needing some kind of help. Anyway, you're better than most of my or our or the psychics working here. Ray gave Carol a brief smile. Carol Munchhead, is it? She's a good psychic, too. He smiled at a few of the dogs just to make sure that they knew he was happy. So I'm not crazy? Carol Munch, could you explain? Would you tell Pearl or Pam or this young lady about how it is or how it was for you for your life? Ray waited for Carol to nod and then ran for the door. He was out and away as quick as a donut in a police convention. Carol stood there with her 6 customers. When I was young, I would talk to animals, and yes, they all talked back to me. But when I told people what they said, I was treated as if I'd lost my mind, so I stopped talking and listening. Then, one day, a Great Dane asked me what was wrong, why I wouldn't talk to him. I soon learned I had a gift that most people couldn't comprehend, but some were willing to pay for my talent. Now I make a fairly good living communicating with pets and helping out both them and their humans. So I'm not crazy? Only in that you came to work for your Uncle Ray. Pam was very relieved. For a few minutes there she had become convinced that her mind was made of fudge. Now she felt better, less insane. She felt as if she might just enjoy her new ability. Oh, Lord, how am I going to explain this to my mom and dad? Suddenly she didn't feel so good. Your mother tried to send me to live with the neighbors. Or my mother tried to send me to live with the neighbors, Carol laughed. It wasn't till I met your grandmother that things started to go right for me. She petted one of the dogs. Your dad probably already knows, after all, his mother was psychic too. That made sense, since Ray's mother was psychic and Ray's mother was also her dad's mother. Well, Carol had some advice. Don't let on to what you see and hear unless you're with people wishing for that particular ability. One person will think a bunch together will laugh at you because they don't want the others to think they think you're sane. Pam asked, why me? Why am I blessed and cursed with this weird gift I didn't want and I can't return? It seems to run in your family. Pam said, my dad and mom are as psychic as a bunch of bananas. It skips a generation. Your grandmother and your great-great-grandmother were all psychics, but every other generation, no. This didn't make Pam feel any better, but it did give her some answers. I guess I should get back to work, huh? Yes, we still have the excess Monday to survive. Carol tried rearranging some of the grass sticking out of her sweater. Pam didn't feel all that great because the end of the world might still be in her future. The waiting room was still occupied by several dozen waiting people waiting to see either the healers or the psychics or whichever of the staff they needed. Most did their best to act as if Pam were a rational, reasonable person. Most failed miserably at it. Pam had another moment of brain flood. People came here to consult a psychic who could either speak to the dead or converse with animals, but they didn't think the person who came here for the exact same thing might just think they were nuts for doing likewise. Oh wow, no wonder everybody looked so upset. She looked at everybody waiting and gave them her best smile. Most looked away, thinking she was about to have another episode. The officer stuck his head in the door. Excuse me, ma'am, what should we do with the dead thing? Pam was about to answer, but then decided to take it outside. On the porch, she looked at the dead worm. Could you bury it? We would be more than pleased to be of such an honored service, ma'am. The officer pointed to the worm and then the ground, and the soldiers all had shovels and were digging up the grass between the parking lot and the front yard. This might take a while. Pam considered staying and keeping them company, but watching people work just wasn't right. She went inside to do her own work. The waiting room thinned out a lot and then filled back up. People who left early that day came back wishing for another consultation or reading or a whatnot, whatever a whatnot is. Pam did her best to act as normal as she thought was appropriate in the situation she now found herself in. The phone rang. Good afternoon. How may the bag company help you? She smiled at the handset. Good day to you, sir or ma'am. I am pleased to be contacting you today in regards to your super-rich uncle, who was formerly the king of Ethiopia. He died leaving his total inheritance to be sent to you. If you would be so kind as to give me your name and bank account information, we will be sending a $600 million and 27 cents. It's a scam. No kidding, Sherlock. Pam hung up the phone. Pam went to get some coffee. The day was dragging and she needed something to put zip back in her step. Not that there had been a whole lot of zip to begin with, but she needed something. When she returned to her desk, the crowd waiting had changed. Suddenly, everybody waiting for a healer or a consultant was in uniform. All the humans had felt compelled to find someplace else to while away the time of waiting. Sitting next to a dead man just creeped them out. Pam looked at the waiters. Are you folks here to see someone in particular? She hoped she didn't already know the answer. Yes, we need to talk to you so you can convey our words to others. The person speaking turned out to be a woman dressed in a Navy uniform. Me? Wouldn't it be better to consult with one of the... No, we heard you were the one to see. Heard from... Sergeant Dingleopagus said that you were the one to see. She gave Pam a don't even try to argue with me look. Pam guessed they had some last words to pass on to those they had left behind. So, who do you want me to contact, and what shall I say to them? The Navy gal was first, since she had already started talking to Pam. I need for you to get a hold of Bridget Rothmusen and tell her that purse she's looking at is going on sale next week, so she should wait and buy it then. Pam was shocked. A purse? You want to advise somebody on a purse? Well, yeah, she'll save like $20 if she'll just wait a week. The next one to speak was dressed in camo. Tell Gus that chick he's dating is hot. He smiled at everybody in the room. A few smiled back. Tell Mitch Hanrahan I won. He owes me $50. We had a bet as to who would hold her breath the longest. Still not breathing, so pay up, sucker. Pam had a notebook out and was writing down names and phone numbers and words each vanquished service person had to say, no matter how insane it sounded. As she wrote, she couldn't help but think, these guys had some really weird sense of priorities. They could be passing on vital information on the afterlife instead of this nonsense. Tell me about it. Pam looked around to be sure the ghosts didn't think she was crazy. Would they think she was crazy for hearing voices in her head? She wondered. And wonder led to questions. Do you guys think it's a bit odd that I sometimes hear voices? Oh, that's just plain crazy. Voices in your head means your brain is scrambled. The ghosts all agreed with this comment. None of them wanted to look weird to their companions. It would appear as if peer pressure worked in the afterlife as well. When all the uniformed ghosts had passed on their not-so-vital words, they gathered their belongings, yes, ghosts have things too, and left. Pam grabbed the phone and started making calls. Hello, Bridget Rasmussen. My name is Pam from the bag company, and I have a message from a friend of yours. Sometimes the best thing to do is just go with it. What's the worst thing that could happen? Pam handed out the messages, whether the recipients wanted to hear them or not. There came a rumbling sound. The floor under Pam's feet vibrated like a huge truck was passing overhead. The things on her desk bounced around. Her half-empty coffee cup fell onto the desk and crashed to the floor. The dust fell from the ceiling above. Pam looked around, fear filling her with dread. A dread filled her with trepidation. This led to anxiety. Is this it? The end of the world has arrived? Pam thought about running outside, but if the world was ending, the outside would end just as much as the inside, right? It got quiet. The kind of quiet just before somebody says something stupid they didn't want the whole crowd to hear. A cheer went up from the library. Pam wondered what the celebration might be, so she tiptoed over to the door and peeked in. All the staff was waving their cups in the air. The customers who had gone in to have a cup of joe looked around wondering what was going on. Eddie saw Pam at the door and waved her in. We made it. The end of the world has passed by once more. He pointed at the clock on the wall. It was an old analog clock that had to be wound up every day. It showed 12:03. It's now Tuesday and the Access Monday has passed. This brought about another cheer from the staff. Pam looked around at all the smiling faces. So the world won't end after all? Well, not this time. Maybe next time. How often does this happen? World-ending day or night, for that matter. Eddie answered. Well, let's see. Blood Moon Prophecy, April 2014, October 2015. Passed without so much as a sneeze. Mayan calendar, December 21st, 2012. End of the world didn't happen. Herald Camping, October 21st, 2011. Didn't happen. Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, 2010. Nothing. Nibiru Collision, May 2003. 0. Planetary Alignment, May 2000. Not, Pam asked. So how often does the world supposed to end? Every couple of years. So far, everybody's been wrong, I think. What was that rumbling sound I heard? Oh, that. Something blew up in Mr. Armstrong's office. You might need to get him a new one. Everybody grabbed a fresh cup of coffee as a way of celebrating the continuation of life. Even Prince Wapo had a saucer filled to lap at. He liked coffee with his coffee. Pam was told to take Tuesday off so she'd earn the day of rest. She wished the voices in her head would take the day off as well. Her mother wanted to do some mom-daughter stuff, so they went shopping. The mall was finally mostly open. Some parts were closed due to several stores still needing repair and one missing, but Paula didn't need any bling today anyway. Now Paula asked, so what was that vitally important thing you had to tell me? They had stopped at a sandwich shop for lunch. Pam didn't know how to begin. It's just that, you see, I can, what was that about the best thing, just going for it? Mom, I'm psychic. That's nice, dear. Will it help pay for school? Pam was dumbfounded. That's it? All you could say is, that's nice? Oh, come on. You don't think we didn't know about this? It runs in your father's family. It's just too bad about your Aunt Ramona. She's just crazy, but we were waiting for you to bloom. That's why your Uncle Ray offered you a job. Being surrounded by psychics was supposed to bring out your hidden talents. And you didn't tell me? What could we say, really? You're going to see things and hear things that, don't worry, it's not in your head. Pam tried to be contrite. You could have given me a hint or something. Her contriteness didn't hold. So where do you want to go next? Her mom asked. The shoe store. No, wait, dresses. No, let's go look at dress. No, better yet, how about, I don't really care. You choose. Pam was going to let her mom decide. That is the end of The Bag Company #1. I didn't actually set out to write a story about a 17-year-old girl. The original story that I was writing was an 18-year-old boy who had to get a job. But then, I know boys, and at 18, I would not have listened to my parents. So I thought, well, I'll change it to an 18-year-old girl, but that didn't work either, so I had to make her 17. The story that I started out writing had to be changed about 6 times before I even got started. The character, Pam Bogus, I just made her up out of thin air, as well as most of the other characters in the book. As I was writing, I had so many bizarre and interesting characters that I would have to write down who they were, what their talents were, what their thought processes were. Otherwise, I would get some of Mr. Armstrong mixed up with some of Carol Munchausen. Well, by the end of this book, I had all of these really cool, really weird, really extravagant characters, and then the book ended. And I thought, well, that's the end of that. Then I got to thinking, well, I've got all these really cool characters. Why don't I use them again? So I did. I wrote The Bag Company, Here We Go Again, fully intending that that was going to be the last of it. Well, I am now up to, I think, number 9 in this ongoing series, and each one just seems to get a little crazier, a little more spectacular, and a little more entertaining. So if you've enjoyed The Bag Company, be sure and listen to The Bag Company Here We Go Again, which I am going to start recording probably tomorrow or the next day. Until then, this is Chris James for Story Time.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.